Okay, so this is another video about a case study. I'm going to do a series of case studies on police corruption or police malfeasance, even police neglect, to give you an example, to give you a taste of some of the things that go on. And so you should never take the police's view for granted, their honesty for granted. So this is a number of articles relating to police officers' behaviour that can have long and far-reaching effects and can destroy people's lives. So this is an article from The Guardian dating to January 2018. Man convicted of theft in 1976 cleared after Googling his arresting officer. Stephen Simmons was convicted of mailbag theft over 40 years ago, but a chance discovery led to his acquittal. Under the caption it says, and he mentions this in the article, this is an important note, Stephen Simmons said, "One of the hardest things for me was that my parents did not believe me." And he talks about this in the article, but that is one of the main things. If you're accused of something, and even if you're convicted, it does sully your character for the rest of your life, not only with friends and families and work, but also, closer family members like your parents. A man found guilty of stealing mailbags more than 40 years ago has had his conviction quashed in what the Lord Chief Justice described as an exceptional case. The Court of Appeal heard that the arresting officer in the original trial had died in prison not long afterwards, while also serving a sentence for mailbag theft. Stephen Simmons, now 62, a businessman from Dorking in Surrey, this is in the UK, was arrested with two friends in Clapham, South London in June 1975 by DS Derek Ridgewell of the British Transport Police, who attributed incriminating remarks to the young men. They were allowed to see a duty solicitor who told them that if they called the police liars, the judge would jail them for a long time. In other videos I say if you're arrested, make sure you see the duty solicitor and always follow their advice, because they know what they're talking about, but sometimes you do get bad advice. Continuing, despite the solicitor's warnings, they pleaded not guilty, but they were all convicted. I don't know whether they called the police liars in the case or in their defence. Simmons was sent to a Borstal in Suffolk and served 8 months. He said that the conviction had haunted him ever since, and until recently had not even told his grown-up daughters about the case. Stephen Powles for Simmons told the court Mr. Simmons had been waiting for 43 years for this day. The Crown did not contest the application nor seek a retrial, he said. The court heard that 4 years ago Simmons was given friendly advice by a barrister, Daniel Barnett, on LBC Radio's legal advice programme to Google the name of his arresting officer if he wished to overturn his conviction. He did so without expecting to discover anything, but what emerged was that Ridgewell himself had been jailed for 7 years for mailbag thefts, totalling £300,000 in 1980, which is an awful lot of money in 1980. And he, Ridgewell, had died in prison in 1982. That's 2 years later. "I was gobsmacked," Simmons told The Guardian. He then took his case to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, whose meticulous research, carried out by caseworker Adam Bell, led to the appeal. The Lord Chief Justice Lord Burnett, sitting with Mr. Justice Warby and Mr. Justice Julian Knowles, paid tribute to Bell's remarkable efforts and expressed regret to Simmons that the case had taken so long to come back to court. He said that the evidence before him was extremely telling and it's an exceptional case. Well, I don't know how exceptional it is. The more I dig, the more sort of cases I come across about the police, taking shortcuts and even lying outright. So you always have to be careful. This is why it's important to review case studies I explain in other videos. What also emerged, the court heard, was that Ridgewell was responsible for a series of notorious cases in which young black men were falsely accused of mugging on the London Underground. One victim was Winston True, who along with 3 others became known as the Oval Four, and who was present in court for Simmons' appeal. True has written a book, Black for a Cause, which detailed Ridgewell's long history of fit-ups and which became part of the investigation. Now, as I said in other videos about what you should do once you're arrested is do research on not only your accuser and the law, but also the police force and the police officers, to make sure, or to try and find out if there are any complaints about individuals or about procedures, and also to do research on books. So I've written a couple of books and I'll talk about those at the end, but this book, The Oval Four, details it. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're having to defend yourself, there is no harm in reading all sorts of books to try and glean as much information and to follow the experience of others who've gone through it before you. You might get some useful information, some useful tips. The final member of the Oval Four, 4 young black men who were fitted up by a corrupt police officer nearly 50 years ago, has finally had his conviction overturned by senior judges. The unit was run by Detective Sergeant Derek Ridgewell, who had previously served in the South Rhodesian, now Zimbabwean, police force, and was involved in a number of high-profile and controversial cases in the 1970s. They were convicted in November 1972 of attempted theft and assaulting police, and so on. That's nearly 50 years ago. So if you're interested in following out these case studies, I would suggest reading this book and others so you get an idea of what people go through and what to look out for. Carrying on. This is one of the happiest days of my life, said Simmons outside court after his conviction was quashed. It has hardly sunk in, but I'm not a criminal anymore. I can hold my head up high. One of the hardest things for me was that my parents did not believe me because they were of the generation that believed that the police could not lie. Now, this was similar to my case. I was arrested, and I explained this in other videos, and I was on bail for 3 years. An allegation was made against me. Intelligence had been received by the police, and the police didn't investigate. The housemates, who were I believe, the source of the problem, but again, because they wouldn't release the intelligence to me, I couldn't prove anything. But again, it was a stressful time for my parents, and initially my parents were curious, but when they saw how the police treated the investigation and how their own statements to the police were completely misrepresented, they turned, and my parents, my mother in particular, became very vexed by the whole thing, and she doesn't believe anything the police say now. So it's good to take a cynical view of these kinds of things, especially if you're on the receiving end of a police investigation. Continuing, he had suffered ill health as a result of the prosecution, and one of his co-defendants became an alcoholic and is now dead. Ridgewell ruined 3 lives for no reason, and I'm sure many, many more. If this can help someone else who was also arrested by him, then at least something will have been achieved. True, of the Oval Four, who embraced Simmons after the case, said, "Today is a great day. This opens the door for me to present my case. It means the evidence that Ridgewell gave us in our trial is as tainted as in Stephen's case." So that is one example. That's a historic example, and this is why it's always good to reserve judgment if you're on these kinds of cases. And this is a more recent example. So this dates to May the 13th, 2020. Officer dismissed without notice. A special case hearing was held on the 30th of April in 2020 in respect to PC Hitesh Lakhani of the Met's Central West BCU. The officer had been found guilty on the 10th of December 2019 at Kingston Crown Court of perverting the course of justice as a result of submitting a false report to police. He was sentenced on the 10th of January to 3 years imprisonment. The court heard that on the 5th of September 2018, while off duty, PC Lakhani called police to say a child had been sexually assaulted in Uxbridge. An investigation began, however no related allegations were identified, and analysis of CCTV showed the alleged offence did not happen. PC Lakhani was suspended from duties. Now he made an allegation. I might try and find the information and put it in the description, but he accused someone of doing it. With regard to this case, officer dismissed without notice, who had submitted a false report about a sexual assault in Uxbridge. This came to me via Twitter by Simon Waugh, rest in peace. But when I was doing some further research to try and get the updated information, when I clicked the link, which links to the Met Police's statement, I couldn't find it. Now, I would have read it at the time when I initially retweeted this from Simon, but it did relate to the case. So Simon's tweet was, "A police officer who fabricated a wholly false child sexual assault allegation against an innocent man he had previously had an argument with has been jailed for 3 years. If UK justice is to be saved, making false sex allegations must have consequences." So I can't find the original allegation. So the police officer had made it against an innocent man, and that man's life could have been destroyed. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention. But the link, the police have removed the article, but I managed to find this one, which relates to the same case, by going through various tweets. But it doesn't detail what he said exactly. It was in the allegation and the relationship he had with the person. But this is, again, what the police can do. So you really do have to be careful and assume innocence before guilt, and you do have to insist on due process when possible. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples. I'm going to do more of these examples about general false allegations and also about police performance and also CPS performance. But I hope that is useful, so do bear this in mind and do your research if you find yourself in a similar situation. Okay, thank you. Please subscribe, and if you're interested in helping me, then you can buy the books, obviously. You can find them on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. So they're titled Mad as Hell Parts 1 and 2 by David N. Anderson. But there's also, I'm setting up a Patreon account, so if you want to support me and help me try and knock out more videos, that'd be a great help. Okay, thank you.
Turn up, let's go.